Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tara Etherington, and I'm the Executive Director for the Centre for Entrepreneurship in the Faculty of Arts and Science. It is a pleasure to have you all here for the second session of our Share Your Spark speaker series. I want to offer a special welcome to some of our esteemed guests tonight. Interim Dean Stephen Wright from the Faculty of Arts and Science, Professor Charlie Kyle, Principal of Innis College, and Professor Alberto Zambenedetti from the Institute of Cinema Studies. Thank you all for joining us. We are thrilled to be co-hosting tonight's event with Innis College, home of U of T's Cinema Studies Institute, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's fitting that we honor this remarkable milestone tonight by hearing from two successful alumni who will share their spark and inspire the industry's next innovators. Before we get started, I would like to provide our land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As we look to the future, we also look to the innovators and creators in this room. At the Centre for Entrepreneurship, we believe that the same creative drive that shapes a compelling story also powers a successful entrepreneurial journey. We see this incredible talent and innovation from our students and alumni every day, and we're committed to fostering that creative spark and an entrepreneurial mindset throughout our community, regardless of academic or professional path. We do this by providing the tools and community needed to succeed through educational programs that foster an entrepreneurial mindset and build skills to transform ideas into viable ventures. Expert entrepreneur services, including mentorship programs, professional advisory services, and prototyping support. And dedicated innovation spaces, such as our 24/7 co-working space and 4 maker spaces, located here on the 6th floor of the Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Campus West Building. Now, tonight, our speakers are here to share some personal insights, and we hope their journeys will inspire you to realize that you have the potential to spark a new idea, no matter your field of study or expertise. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speakers, Asha Daniere and Linda Schuyler. Leading our conversation today is Asha. Asha co-founded Serial Maven Studios in 2023. With her business partner, she built the foundation for a successful production and distribution business. She became a passive investor earlier this year when Serial Maven merged with another company. Asha is a lawyer and an experienced senior executive. She has served on a general counsel to global media companies for 25 years. Currently, she is the principal of her strategic advisory practice, serves on the board for a variety of public companies, and also sits on the TIFF board of directors. Dedicated to the art of storytelling, Linda is best known for work that explores the human experience, breaks stereotypes, and encourages communications. Linda is the executive producer and co-creator of over 500 episodes of the internationally recognized, multi-award-winning Degrassi television franchise. As a longtime educator, storyteller, and entrepreneur, she is a mentor and guest lecturer at various universities and maintains an active involvement in a range of community and professional organizations. Linda is a member of both the Order of Canada and the Order of Ontario. Her memoir, The Mother of All Degrassi, published in November 2022, won an Axion Silver Medal, and in December 2023, Degrassi was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. We are honored to have time with these two leading entrepreneurs tonight. Thank you all once again for joining us to learn and be inspired. For the Q&A segment, we invite you to join the conversation and submit your questions via the QR code on the screen. Now let's give a very warm welcome to Linda Schuyler and Asha Daniere.
Hello, everybody. And hello, Linda.
Well, hello, Asha.
We're super happy to be here. And we're just going to we're going to share our spark. That's what we're going to do. And just have a chat about entrepreneurialism. So, Linda, I mean, you're an artist. You're a serious commercial negotiator. And you're also an extraordinary entrepreneur. And so when you think about entrepreneurship and the kind of critical qualities that make a successful entrepreneur, what do you think of?
Let's just get right into it,
Well,
shall we,
I mean, we've already caught up. We've already caught up on our lives.
Well, to me, when I think about entrepreneurism, I think about it as a spirit. And I think it's a spirit that is willing to take calculated risk. It's a spirit that actually believes you are going to make the world a better place. And so if you buy into that, I don't see that entrepreneurism is just necessarily limited to commercial business. Mm-hmm. I think that a spirit of entrepreneurialism is something that can be found in academia. I mean, look at our own Geoffrey Hinton, right? I mean, he's got that risk-taking aspect and wanting to change the world. I think he's wondering about if he really should have, but that's another thing, another conversation. I also know some people who I work very closely with in not-for-profit organizations. And a lot of those people who are running those organizations have that kind of spirit where they're willing to take risks, they're willing to put themselves out there because they actually believe they're going to make the world a better place because of what their passion is pushing them forward. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I
think, first of all, you cannot be risk averse and be an entrepreneur. Those are kind of table stakes. But I think when I sort of look at what separates those who are ultimately successful from those who struggle more or just have bigger challenges, it's people who really recognize their own strengths and weaknesses and actually have humility about that and can understand that they have to find partners and people to work with them who make up for their weaknesses and really play to their own strengths and play to the strengths of the people around them. Like it's leadership. It's the same qualities that make good leaders, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I mean, I always think about television production as being a team sport.
Yeah.
Like, we were all enthralled by what our Blue Jays almost did.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of, watching when a good team is working and they're supporting one another, and as you say, recognizing who's got the strength to be here, who's got, the strength over here. And that becomes really critical when you're hiring. And to your point about, I know I don't have a very good legal mind.
But you have a husband who does.
He happens to be my husband as well, which is very handy. But you have to know what strengths you have, and you need to know what strengths your team needs to bring to the table. And then you also need to remind yourself you're not there to do their job. Because I've seen so many times when people are in a position of being a boss where they sort of make people feel, well, if only I was doing it, I'd be doing it better than you. Mm-hmm. And that is like the worst way to run a business. What I find really critical is you have to know what your vision is. You have to know why you're doing what you do. And then you have to make sure that you communicate that vision to all the people who you are hiring on your team. And then you've got to take a leap of faith and give them space. You've got to have confidence in your team that they've bought into the vision, but that you trust them enough to bring their strengths to the job. And, I think about this all the time, like I have very clear principles as to what Degrassi was all about. And Degrassi
What are those principles?
Well, Degrassi was, having spent 8 years as a classroom teacher, I wanted to give a voice to adolescents. I felt at the time in the 1980s, adolescents were not being given a voice on television. So I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted to reassure young people that they weren't alone. And I wanted to celebrate individual differences. I mean, I was teaching in inner city Toronto. I had so many different kids from such rich backgrounds. And I just wondered, you know, how they were managing working through their adolescent years while dealing with families who didn't speak English at home and whatnot. So I wanted to give young people a voice. I wanted to celebrate their differences, and I wanted to reassure them that they were not alone. So those were the broad parameters. Then I had other parameters as well, that every story needed to be told from the young person's perspective. We would never write a scene about adults talking about a kid. The kid would always be from the perspective of the young people. We also had to make sure that we didn't lose our sense of humor along the way.
Right.
But also we were very determined to, if kids were talking about it in the schoolyard, in the mall, and nowadays in social media, we were going to be brave and we were going to talk about it on our show.
Right.
So I had all these sort of basic principles, which really helped me when I was hiring people. Because when you have a company that is dedicated to storytelling for and about young people, you need people who are comfortable in that space.
Right.
And surprisingly, not everybody is. So to go back to my point, is it was really critical for me that people understood what kind of company they were coming to work for, what was going to be expected from the storytelling. But then I wanted them to run with it. Right. You know, I wanted to give my art department to know what my ground rules were, but then to bring their own creativity to it, so that they felt that they had ownership in the project, and they weren't just coming to do a job.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is, to the students in the room, I personally came to entrepreneurship very late in life, and I spent 25 years being like a corporate schmuck. And I remember thinking when I was in college and in law school, and like early in my career, I had such envy for people who had the courage to be entrepreneurial. And I remember thinking, like, I don't have an idea. Like, I don't know what my thing could be. I feel like I might be brave enough, but I don't have the thing. I don't have the passion. And the truth is, the other piece of entrepreneurialism is you kind of have to have something where you can't bear not to do it, where it's almost like you'll cease to exist if you're not doing it. And you can be struck with that thing when you're 12, and you can be struck with that thing when you're 57. And so if you're sort of sitting there thinking, God, I kind of feel like I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know where my path is, it will come. It will come. You just have to be open to it and know that in the back of your mind that that's one of your ambitions. And then, you know, the universe will send you something. I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
So here's this question. We said I have sort of mixed feelings about this topic. But I'm going to throw it out there anyway, because it'll be an interesting to talk about. So being a woman in the entrepreneurial space, I mean, you are a woman in the entrepreneurial space and also in the production world. You know, one thing is for sure, still true. It is, I forget what the statistics are, maybe 10x times harder for women to do capital raises than it is for men still. And so tell me what else you've sort of experienced about
Well,
that.
I know we talked about this a bit beforehand. It's really interesting because going back to your earlier point about having passion, it's a much overused word, but it's so true. And my passion for storytelling for young people grew out of my 8 years of being in the classroom. And it just got to a point where I thought, you know, I'm enjoying teaching these kids, but I'd much rather be making my own films and television shows. So when I made that choice, which my parents at the time, who were British immigrants, were so proud of me for having a proper job, as they called it, with a regular salary, that I would think about leaving this to become an entrepreneur, because it was the last thing they wanted me to do. But it was something that I just felt really strongly about. I felt that, my background at Innis College, which was limited in those days from the 1970s when I took the few film courses they had, but it sparked my interest. I then took that interest and I wrote a film studies course for my junior high school students, and I convinced the Board of Education to let me teach that, which was great because it was groundbreaking in those days. We weren't doing that in junior school. And then I just got to the point where it's, you know what, seriously, I love these kids, but I really want to tell my own stories, but I wanted to tell them for them and about them. And it's really interesting. There's times, when you're waiting for the bank to close, or you're trying to figure out, is your broadcaster going to be on board or not? And you do really wonder why you have done what you've done. And because there are moments that are quite stressful.
Absolutely.
And I would keep a binder. I had a black binder behind my desk, and it was full of letters and emails. Nothing to do with press comments, nothing to do with broadcaster notes, but everything to do with my audience and young people who sent me in emails and said, thank you for the story of Marco. You gave me the courage to come out as a gay person, and I felt I could do that because of your show. It was these binders are just full of these lovely emails. And when I'm wondering how I'm going to get the bank to close, I'm wondering how I'm going to meet payroll on Thursday at 5 o'clock, I have to just take out those letters sometimes and remind myself why I do what I do. And that's I think that's really important no matter what area of entrepreneurialism you're in. There comes a time when the actual process can feel like it's taking over, and you do have to bring yourself back to first principles and just sort of say, why am I doing this?
Right. Okay, I don't think you answered the question.
Oh, I didn't answer your question, did I?
I mean, that was fascinating.
Well, I started being an independent filmmaker in the 1980s when there was no independent production in television. We'd had quite a good industry in features, but there wasn't independent production. And so I was just one of many who were trying to find my way. And it really wasn't until hindsight, when I wrote my book, that I realized, oh, wait a moment, I really was one of the only women in that space. But I wasn't there because I was trying to prove something as a woman. I was there because I had stories I wanted to tell.
Right, right. And I think that is the other thing about having a passion and sort of doing something that you can't live without. It's almost like when I was in my corporate schmuck jobs, I would get super irritated by, what I perceived to be like patriarchal annoyances. But it's funny, once I got out of that environment, and sometimes I was like fueled with resentment, but I got out of that environment and started doing things that I really loved, and I stopped even thinking about it. Like, all I was thinking about was what the barriers were, and then and not sort of, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the patriarchy is still existing, but like, just wasn't occupying my brain space because I was too focused on getting from step A to B to C to D. So it's sort of a funny thing. Anyway, okay. I think we beat that one to death. This is a good question. Has anything surprised you about yourself through your entrepreneurial journey?
Many things.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I would have to say my resilience, because there's no question there are times when you're an entrepreneur that you hear no more than you hear yes. And no is a very hard word to hear.
Yeah.
Can I give an example from Degrassi?
Please.
We were in season 9 of Degrassi, The Next Generation. Now, for those of you who know television production, to get a show to season 9 is pretty awesome. So we were called down to Yvonne Fitzanne's office at CTV, your friend, and the year before, we had done a Degrassi Goes Hollywood special. It was a really fun little 4-part special. And Yvonne started going on about how that special was really great, and I think maybe we need to do more shows like that. And, you know, Degrassi was a half an hour, but that show really was 2 hours. I think we should be doing an hour show, and maybe we don't do Degrassi anymore. Let's do something about Canadian kids going to Hollywood. So when I got on the elevator with my husband, I said, Stephen, I think we were just canceled. In a very lovely way. I mean, we were told that there could be, you know, another series for us. So we went back to the office, and everybody knew we were going down to the big broadcaster meeting. And of course, the whole team wanted to know, well, have we been picked up for another year or not? And we decided not to say anything because we were confused by the message.
Yeah.
Well, that night, Stephen and I went out to dinner, and he said, you're not going to believe this, Linda, but I just got a call from our American broadcaster. Our American broadcaster would like to pick us up for the next season, but they want us to do 40 episodes.
Oh my God.
So it was like, wait a moment, our Canadian broadcaster is canceling us. Our American broadcaster wants 40 episodes. So we then did get confirmation that, in fact, yes, we were being canceled by CTV. So we decided, you know, well, you don't say no to a 40-episode order. So we started pursuing how we could possibly make a financial plan that worked within that. And, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to go into the weeds and say, in order to take advantage of Canadian tax credits, which are important when you're putting your budget together, you need to have some kind of Canadian broadcaster or distributor attached.
Thank you. And in order to get the equity investments as well.
That's right. So she had to find a Canadian partner or broadcaster or distributor. Okay.
So we had 2 or 3 people who were interested, and we're working on, you know, we're shooting season 9 while we're trying to finance season 10. And at the last minute, Stephen said, because CTV had been paying us as a primetime show because we were running it at 8:30 at night. So with the financing we were able to bring from the American broadcaster, we realized that if CTV paid the children's rate, which was greatly lower than the primetime rate, we would still be on side to get the funds. And so we called back CTV and said, you know, like, what about this? If we do this, we do that, and do that. Turned out they were just reinventing Much Music at that time. So they said, you know what? At that price, I think we can do it. So that's great. So we've now got 40 episodes that we can have ordered by an American and Canadian broadcaster. But in order to make the financing work, we had to drastically reduce our budget.
Right.
So we had to call our team together, and we had all the heads of the department come in, and we said, now, here's how it goes. We have to shoot faster, we have to shoot cheaper, and we have to shoot better.
Right.
And normally, you know, people would say to you under those circumstances, well, you can have 2 of the 3, you just can't have all 3, right? So, but we said, we're not having that. We want all 3. So the departments went back, and they were all asked to take a look at how they could find efficiencies, how we could make it work. And we came up with a whole new model for shooting. And we decided to block shoot 4 episodes at a time to give us, that bought us quite a lot of efficiencies there. But this was really hard on the writing department. And we had so many episodes to do, I actually had to hire 2 writers' rooms. And so we were running 2 writers' rooms on the same show. We would deal with this by meeting every Monday morning, getting everybody on the same page. So what they had to do is the hair department came up with, well, we will keep the same hairstyle for 4 episodes. Wardrobe said, we will...
Nobody shampoos their hair.
Wardrobe said, we'll bring portable change things down, because if we were shooting in the grade 8 classroom, we would shoot 4 different episodes in the grade 8 classroom. They'd have to make quick changes behind the scenes. Hair would stay the same. So every department came back to us with where they could find their efficiencies. And then our final meeting was before we went into production with our young cast, who I always cast age appropriate, which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
And their parents, to talk to them about how critical it was going to be that they kept 4 scripts in their head at the same time, that they would be able to be versatile and jump from one story, to another. And it was incredible. I mean, we went from sort of being canceled from doing the biggest output that we'd ever done. And the best thing, we still got to make that other series that Yvonne was talking about.
Oh my God.
Because we put another writer onto that and went back to him and said, remember you asked for that hour show about young Canadian kids trying to make it in Hollywood? Well, we got a show for you called the LA Complex. And we did that simultaneously with Degrassi.
That's amazing. Yeah, so resilience.
Resilience, innovation, like reinventing things on the fly, keeping the spirits of your team up,
Right.
making them feel like they're involved and their input is important.
Right. Yeah. It's great. And how, when you talk about that resilience, I mean, look, I think part of it is necessity is the mother of invention, right? If you feel like there's only one thing that you can do and you love it so much you can't do anything else, when something gets in your way, you're going to find a creative solution, because the alternative is too horrible. So that's, I think, one thing that feeds into resilience. But how else do you think you maintain that?
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, are you born with it, do you think? Like, I don't know, would you have had it if you'd done something else? Is it just part of your character? Did you have to cultivate it? Like,
I think a lot of it you're born with. I mean, when I look at my parents, I realize that as immigrants, how resilient they actually were. Without actually using that word or without preaching about it, they just were. So a lot of it is kind of the raw material, that whether it's nature or nurture. But the question I thought you were going to ask me was, how do you reboot and how do you recharge?
well, sure, tell us
Was that not the question?
I mean, I'd love to hear that. Let's hear it. How do you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that is the really tricky one, because it's so, it is all consuming. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love about my job is it's a complete jumping nimbly back and forth, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain, like sort things out with the bank, sort things out with the broadcaster, try and fix what's wrong with Act 2 in this script, what wardrobe is appropriate over here. And I love all that, and I like going back. I wouldn't want to be in just one realm or the other.
And do you enjoy them both equally?
I do.
Really?
I do. And I love solving problems. And so it's hard, though, when your brain's firing like that, it's hard to bring it down.
Right.
And my husband is a meditator, and he's given me so many books on the subject, and he's given me tapes.
We all have that friend.
Tapes and all sorts of things. It says, Linda, this is going to help you sleep better and whatnot. It works for him, doesn't work for me. I do find physical exercise works for me. I like to play tennis, I like to swim, do some yoga, and I do find that does help. Sometimes after I've swum a few lengths, I'll find a solution
Yeah.
to that act 2 that I didn't realize I had.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love to do is I love to do jigsaw puzzles. And I find, like, I've just finished doing the one on The Great Gatsby, and it was awesome. All these women in costume, men in costumes, and champagne bottles everywhere. But just that fitting pieces together, it just takes my mind somewhere else. In the same way reading a good book does, but.
Yeah, exactly. And so tell me, like, if you could pick 2 or 3 highlights from those 525 episodes, I know that's probably tough, but like things that stand out in your memory as just, when your heart was incredibly full and you were super proud or really moved or.
Well, there's one example that comes to mind when you say that, is here we were with our new mandate, cheaper, faster, better. And I had a young writer working who had started as a story coordinator. And I knew when I hired him as a story coordinator that he had the ability to grow into a writer, a good writer. And he came and pitched us on a story for a transgender character in Degrassi. And this was in 2010. And I said, I don't know if we're ready to do this. He said, yes, we are. He said, I really think we can do this. And he came up with a fantastic script with the help of the team, but the script was really great. And we put on prime time the first transgender, this is before Orange is the New Black, and we did it with age-appropriate casting. And it was noticed, and we won a Peabody for that award. Right. So the year we were asked to go cheaper, faster, better,
You won a Peabody.
we achieved it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And we achieved it by a team who totally bought into the mandate, and who were all of them were like just sort of pushing in the trenches there. And winning that Peabody was a pretty, we've been very lucky. We've won a lot of awards, but that was a pretty special one.
That's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Exactly. Okay, so now let me go to the reverse. Give me a dark, just despondent moment. Or have you put those in the closet and never to be taken out again?
I'll go back to something that happened very early on when I was doing Degrassi Junior High, or trying to get Degrassi Junior High off the ground. And you hear about this a lot with producers. When you have to have a broadcaster, because that's why we're producing this stuff, we want to get it out there. But when you have a broadcaster, you also have broadcaster notes, which can drive everybody a little bit berserk. But you have to know, there's sometimes when you get notes from the broadcaster that you just have to swallow it and kind of do what they're suggesting. You have to know what grounds you're going to fight on, what hill you're going to die on.
Yeah.
Well, we were developing, I had already done The Kids of Degrassi Street, and it had caught the attention of PBS. So I entered into a development deal with PBS to develop what would become Degrassi Junior High. And it was really critical for me, as I had told you, that one of my founding principles are everything has to be told from the young person's point of view, and we need to honor their voice. So I met this woman, I'm working with her, we're getting everything really to the point that we're going to go down to Boston and pitch it. And she was staying over with us, and she said, I just want to make one little comment. I said, yes? And she said, well, I've been thinking about this, and I think it's really great that we're telling the stories from the kids' perspective. But we're telling some pretty tough stories. Like, we knew in the first season we were going to have a pregnant teen and deal, with some tough issues. She said, I don't think kids are quite ready to hear some of these stories. We've been developing it for like weeks now.
It's kind of the point.
She said, but I think if we had like a really lovely old lady who lived down the street. And if she had lots of cats, because kids like cats, so the kids at the end of each episode could come and visit the cat lady, and the cat lady could reassure them that they had made the right choices. So it was like, okay, this is a hill we die on. We cannot give authentic kids choices through the cat lady down the street.
Oh my God.
So I said no. And she said, well, I don't think we can go ahead with this.
Wow.
Meanwhile, CBC were fantastic. They were 100% behind us. Now, with being an entrepreneur, there is something that comes into your life periodically called serendipity, which we have no control over. And as luck would have it, one of our episodes from the kids of Degrassi Street had been up for an international Emmy. And we went down to New York, and we won the Emmy, which was lovely. And there was a table of people from WGBH Boston there. And this lovely gentleman, very well dressed, came up to me, and he said, oh, Linda, I hear that we're going to be working together on your new project. And I said, oh, no, we're not. So we have creative differences. This is sort of Linda having just won an Emmy and having probably drunk too much champagne, right? And it was like, we got back to Toronto, and I thought, oh, what have I done? Seriously, what have I done? And in those days, we had fax machines, and the fax machines started running, and it was a contract from WGBH Boston. And I took it down to who would later become my husband, Stephen Stone, our lawyer.
Did he start out as your lawyer?
He started out as my lawyer.
Scandal. You heard it here first, folks.
No, it's all good. Seriously, it's all good.
Kidding.
And so he read the contract, and I said, no, is there anything in there about a cat lady? He says, no, nothing about the cat lady. And we got the contract, and the cat lady never came up again.
Amazing.
But boy, it was like, it's to this day, I sort of look back and think, how did I have the courage to say no? Because it was one of the things that was so fundamental to what I was trying to do, that if we'd pulled that thread, we would have had, the show might have had a year or two in it.
Right.
It wouldn't have had 525 episodes.
Right. And it wouldn't have been it wasn't your baby. Like you're right. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so what's next? I mean, what's happening now? Let's look forward.
Well, it's interesting. We sold the company a few years back, and my company consisted of, we had bought this really lovely studio. We had 5 acres downtown Toronto with a back lot and studio. And that was a big moment when we were given the opportunity to sell the business. I'd been asked earlier on in my career at times if we would consider taking the company public. And I'd never wanted to be a publicly traded company. I'd never wanted to be slave to quarterly returns. I wanted my driver to be storytelling. And at times I doubted that judgment when we would have, but I had resisted. And then we got this opportunity from Michael Donovan to sell the company. It was right around the time when both Stephen and I had aging parents who were not doing that well. We had an adult son who was not doing well. And we made the decision to sell. That was when you've nurtured your company from just a nothing up, and to sell it, that was huge. That was huge. So then we stayed on.
Can I ask you a question just before you move on from that? So I'm curious, like, did you have tremendous mixed feelings about that? Like, was that very difficult? It must have been.
It was really difficult.
Yeah.
But I knew Michael Donovan, and I worked with him. He and I did work together with the, CMPA, our Producers Association, and it just was that timing of of age and health and family needs and whatever. And at that point, you know, I had completed 525 episodes of Degrassi.
Yeah.
And
Were you sick of it?
no.
Right.
No.
So had those other things not been present, you might have carried on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No question.
Yes.
No question. But there is, you know, at the end of the day, there is
Life.
There is life.
Yeah.
So we stayed on for a while and worked with the company, but that only worked for 3 years. And
Yeah.
that's another classic thing about
That is
entrepreneurs who then get hired on, right?
Yes. The classic burnout.
So I'm actually really enjoying, we do a lot of philanthropy work now. I'm doing a lot of work with Kids Help Phone, which has a lot of the same kind of mandate that Degrassi has. And I've just completed a documentary that I went back to my documentary roots and did a documentary on the homeless encampment in Coburg, which is where we have our farm. So keeping busy.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think you have another book in you?
Sorry?
Do you think you have another book
No.
in you? No.
No.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that, like the difference in because the truth is, the entrepreneurialism that you talk about, left brain, right brain, and the kind of commercial part of running that production company, combined with the artistic piece, that left brain, right brain. I mean, writing a book is a pretty solitary exercise, and it is not particularly commercial until you're out there trying to sell it. So how did that feel? I mean, how did that feel? And what made you decide to do it?
To write the book?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think having sold the company, I think I was ready to sort of take a little retrospective view of what had happened, because sometimes it's only when you look back and start joining the dots that you realize, oh, this, then that,
Yes.
you know, because it sounds like, oh, you know, I had a passionate drive and it just was all forward momentum. Well, no, there's a lot of like this along the way. But I found writing that book the most painfully lonely time.
Yeah.
Because I'm so used to like walking next door to somebody and say, what do you think of this? Or,
Right.
you know, dropping into my editor, and how's it going here? And it wasn't until actually the editing process began on my book and I started working with, it felt a bit more like a team.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think I have another
Right.
book in me. I'm sure I might have another documentary or another, maybe even a feature. I do think about that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, you know, if you're thinking about what you are, you know, where your drive is and where you want your passion to take you. I mean, there is the old adage, find the thing you love and you'll be successful at it. But the other thing is to think about things like, you know, am I someone who likes being in an environment where it's very social and where I have to collaborate with other people? Or am I someone who likes to, you know, do research, sit alone, you know, be alone with my thoughts? Like self-awareness, sort of going back to what we started with in this conversation about what are the key ingredients of successful entrepreneurship. I think that's such a big part of it, knowing yourself and being able to kind of sort out what the most fundamental aspects of your character are that you're going to need to incorporate into your career, right? In the same way you have to do that with the way you're going to be in a relationship or with a friend or a parent. Anyway, I was curious because those are so disparate, those two things.
Yeah, and the one thing I think is important to hold on to too is you are the sum of all your experiences. And it's very interesting because I actually never set out to be a junior high school teacher. I was being a good, you know, hippie kid back in when I was 18 years old, started my travels around the world, and I was involved in a very bad car accident. So I had to come back to Canada, and when I came back to Canada, I was too late to get into any universities, and the only place that would accept me was Teachers College. So I went to Teachers College. And so then I spent 4 years teaching, and I took university courses, then I went back to U of T, fortunately found Innis College, finished out my degree, but then went back to teaching, and I spent in total 8 years teaching. And you know what? I couldn't have made Degrassi if I hadn't had that 8 years teaching. So, you know, it was really, I really felt that I was the most unlucky person in the world when I was the sole survivor of a very nasty car crash.
Awful.
But life has a way of taking you places. And those 8 years that I spent in the classroom were invaluable to not only the storytelling that I was doing, but also when you, and those of you who are educators here will know this, when you're talking to a class of 30 students or however many it is, it's not a class, it's 30 individual people. And that has been really a fundamental, important thing for me to keep in mind when I'm running my business. I just don't have staff. I have individual people with their own needs and their own backstories. So I really encourage people, and it's interesting, Asha, you say you didn't become an entrepreneur till about 25 years into, or however.
30 years into, yeah.
But it's the cumulative experience that takes you to where you are today, right?
100%. And actually, I'm so grateful now. I mean, I used to resent the law. I sort of thought, what a big mistake. Why did I ever do that? And you know, to be honest, in the corporate world, I was really using my skill set to make the 0.0001% even richer than they already were. Like, that is kind of what corporate law is when you really strip it all away. But once I started doing my own thing, I realized that I got to use that skill set for things that mattered to me. And I am so grateful for that skill set, so grateful for it. And also grateful for like all the things I learned from the 0.001%, because they're pretty smart and they know how to get where they want to get to. So yeah, it's all the journey. And honestly, I really do believe it's sort of just, you got to stay open and never feel like you're in a prison of your own making. You know, stay open to different opportunities and things that might come your way. I think I'm supposed to start taking questions. I don't know. I was on a very strict schedule and I forgot it as soon as I got up here. So we're going to start. This is funny. There's like a bunch of questions about the Degrassi, like, why did Degrassi kill off Adam?
Oh my God. I always get that question, and the other one is, why did you kill JT? Oh my gosh.
You used none of these questions are about entrepreneurialism, but it's fine, we'll go with it. You used all non-professional actors in your shows. How did that impact show production and the end product?
Well, that's not quite true.
Okay.
When I first started, yes, we had untrained talent because there was no, as I said earlier, there was no independent production, television production happening at that time. There was also no agents who represented young people, except if they were in commercials. So, and the last thing I wanted in my show was kids who could sell commercials, cereal, and whatnot. That's not the authentic kids that I wanted. So yes, for the kids of Degrassi Street and the early days of Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High, I did not care if a kid had any background. We would put them through workshops and, but again, you know, this sort of talks to another piece of being an entrepreneur. You just have to be innovative. You have to come up with the processes at the time. And so we invented how to run workshops and how to train kids to be camera ready, and also how to create, because we were telling stories about the same age that they were, how did we help them to keep a life balance in what we were doing? So we would build our production schedules so that we would take them out of school as little as possible. And so that there was a lot of innovation in terms of how to actually manage a show that had age-appropriate kids at the center of it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, this is a question for me. What was the main push that drew you to leaving your corporate job and becoming an entrepreneur? To be honest, I just got sick of having a boss. Like, it's not a thing I'm super proud of. I just got tired of having someone, watching somebody else make mistakes or have successes that weren't mine. I just wanted, and kind of being told how to get from A to B to C. And honestly, unless you're the CEO of a company in the corporate world, you're never the final decision maker. And I think CEOs have a pretty tough time. I don't know that I'd ever want to be a CEO of a corporation. It's pretty stressful and very bottom line driven. And I remember one of Mike McMillan saying to me, you can't really be friends with the people that work in your company when you're the CEO. Like, that's not your job. And I like being friends with the people that work. Anyway, that was the main push. Okay, any advice on storytelling?
Well, that's a lecture in itself, isn't it? I actually don't even know where to start with that question, other than try to make it as authentic as it possibly can be.
Yeah. Did you feel like the Degrassi story, so you had those 3 principles, but before you sat down and started writing, had it sort of come to sit in your brain? Like, it's like many artists of all dimensions talk about how sometimes they feel like they're just a vehicle, like something just arrives in them and they kind of have to get it out of their system. Was it like that for you, or was it different?
It was more having seen the lived experience of my kids and also of my 15-year-old sister who got pregnant and was sent away to a home for unwed mothers, as you did in those days. And it was having these experiences in my life that my sister's story became the story why I told the Spike story of having a pregnant teen. And I also wanted to tell that story so that it wasn't just like it was a special. We had a pregnant teenager, and there you go. I wanted to grow with that character through the series and watch what that meant. It's not just that you have a baby, then you have a toddler, and then you have this, right, and you're still trying to go to school and go out on dates and whatever. So my storytelling has been very observational.
Yeah, and from lived experience. Okay, here's a good one. How do you foresee, this is a complicated question. How do you foresee the change of markets for TV and film in 5 to 10 years?
Oh my gosh,
I
if
know.
only we could
Guys.
have the magic ball.
It's not good.
But you know what? Regardless of what happens with AI and what happens with how we're going to streaming evolves and whatnot, you got to hold on to the fact that people love story. People need good story. So however the delivery system is going to happen, and you know what's interesting for us is whatever the medium is for your story, it does impact how you tell the story. And I learned that very
From
specific.
Marshall McLuhan?
Sorry?
From Marshall McLuhan.
Absolutely, yes. But I learned it firsthand because for the last 2 seasons of Degrassi, we produced it for Netflix. And on Netflix, the day that the show comes out, they all come out. And what I learned that first season when it came out is we were used to parceling our stories out so that it happened week after week after week. And so not so much on our big storylines. The big sort of issue-driven stories worked for us. It was the intimate storylines about on and again and off again relationships, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, this sort of thing. And when it plays out with a week in between, it was quite interesting. But when it all played back to back, we got criticized that, oh, these people were being so fickle and changing their minds and whatnot. And it was like, oh, we hadn't absorbed what that streaming, that impact that streaming has on your storytelling. So how stories are delivered is interesting, but the good story is going to be good story, and you will find a way to write it for whichever medium it is. So I'm actually very optimistic about the future. People need stories.
Yeah, yeah. I'm slightly less optimistic, not for storytelling in general, but for the Canadian production community, because there's an enormous amount of concentration that's happening in the market in the US and in Canada. And the way that the financing of television production is moving, it's becoming harder and harder for independent Canadian producers to essentially get things made. And the problem, of course, is that when you have that sort of concentration of story making, when so much of what we're consuming is created by a smaller and smaller group of people, you just end up invariably with kind of less diverse stories and less quirky, cool things that you're able to consume. So that's my one concern, and which is not to say, I believe in innovation, and I believe in the Canadian production sector, and so I believe we will find our way to keep generating interesting content, but it's just getting harder and harder. And the other piece, we were talking earlier about how in order to access the Canadian tax credit system, so one of the many reasons that the big American studios come to Canada to produce shows here is because they get to take advantage of our tax credits, which can end up covering up to 30% of their budget, of their Canadian budget. So where was I going with this? It's gone. Concentration, thank you. So in order to access those credits, you as a Canadian producer also have to knock on the door of Canadian broadcasters to get a license from them. But as we see fewer, Chorus is in a very difficult situation. Wild Brain, very difficult situation. Bell and Rogers are, their budgets are shrinking in terms of their license fees. So it's not just the American piece that's impacting the Canadian production sector. It's also our own economy and our own broadcast sector. So that is where the sort of generation of new business models is going to have to come from. Like we're going to have to see everything from the big telecoms to the way that the regulatory system works, all morph into new models. And so that's where, innovation at the macro level comes in, and I hope we see it soon. Okay. For someone new to entrepreneurship and a new founder of an early stage startup, first of all, congrats, awesome, good for you. What advice do you have for building a strong foundation or system in managing all aspects of a business, i.e. market research, business model, marketing? What advice do we have for building a strong foundation or system?
Well, the part of it is hiring the right people.
Yeah.
As we said very early on about understanding where your strengths are, play to your strengths, and, find the people who can support you and provide you with their strengths that you need.
Right. The other thing I would say is be curious and inquisitive. Like, I've always thought it's really useful to find role models. Find people who have done maybe not the exact thing that you want to do, but similar things. And I think every entrepreneur does this. But just don't be afraid to buy someone coffee and ask them 10 questions. The thing about entrepreneurs is they love other entrepreneurs. They just want to help them because they see a little bit of a reflection of themselves, and it's a little bit of a club, So there will always be people who will want to mentor you and help you and answer questions for you and make introductions for you. A huge part of entrepreneurialism is networking, right? Like just getting people to make introductions and get you in the door at the bank or get you in the door for this partnership. So that's a big piece of it, is just don't be afraid to work the room, you know, in the real and metaphorical sense.
And partly, too, is get involved with your associations. The associations that, like I was saying, you know, I got involved in the Canadian Film and Television Producers Association, because there you find like-minded people, and it's out of those associations that you can do lobby efforts with the government, and it's, you know, it's a way of giving back, but also finding out what's going on. So I would highly recommend that.
Oh, how many hats have you worn in your career? Producer, line producer, writer, other roles at departments related to TV production? I mean, you kind of just, when you started, you started your own company. So were you ever line producing or anything? No.
I wouldn't say it was line producing, but I mean, in the early days, let me tell you what a day was like on the kids of Degrassi Street. I would get up in the morning and I would make sandwiches in the back kitchen. Then I would get in my car and I would drive around the neighborhood and pick up kids from, you know, this house and that house and that house, making sure they had the right wardrobe with them because they took their own clothes home the night before, and get them to set. Then I would co-direct and produce, and then we would eat my sandwiches for lunch. And so I was sort of the driver and
Craft services
and all of that. So yeah, but it's great when you learn that way, because you just know, you learn all the nitty-gritty of production, which is why I always say to people, it's great to get in there as a production assistant, or like get in there as a writer's coordinator or something, which might sound terribly just administrative, but you will learn so much. And Asha's comment is so true, that people want to share their knowledge, and they're generous with it. So, you know, just get a foot in the door, however you can.
Yeah, 100%. And like humility is a big thing. The first job I ever had in the TV world were faxes. I mean, we're old folks, but my job was it was for an animation studio, Nelvana, which is part of, sadly, has been struggling under chorus, but my job was to go in every morning, go over to the fax machine, pick up the faxes off the photocopier, off the fax machine, take them to the photocopier, make copies of them, and distribute them to different people. And I remember thinking, like, I'm too good for this job. But it didn't matter. I wasn't. And it didn't matter, because that led to the next thing, which led to the next thing, led to the next thing. So no job is too small if it's in the industry that you want it to.
Totally. I see we're going to be...
We're out of time.
I'm going to just indulge you for one moment to the person who asked the very first question about why did we kill Adam. I didn't mean to sort of cut you short, but what I will have to say is it was the young actor who was playing the transgender role was actually having a very hard time keeping it up, and she was feeling very conflicted, which is actually in hindsight, and hindsight is always better. We would have hired a transgender person to play that, but we didn't, and it was so hard on that young woman. After about 3 years in that role, she begged to be released. So it wasn't a creative choice, but it was out of respect for the young performer. So that's why Adam died.
Okay, now we know. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad we got that answer in. That's
Me too.
well, good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Stephen Wright, and I have the pleasure of being the interim dean in the Faculty of Arts and Science here at the University of Toronto. Let me start by thanking Linda and Asha for that incredibly engaging and inspiring conversation, and the deep insights they've given us into entrepreneurship in the entertainment industry and beyond. Thank you both so much. I'd also like to thank all those who helped bring this event together, especially colleagues from our Center for Entrepreneurship, Innis College, and the Cinema Studies Institute, and the advancement team in the Faculty of Arts and Science. Let's thank them for putting on this incredible event. And thank all of you. This is just a fantastic crowd. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, for contributing your outstanding questions that really fielded more conversations. I'm a scientist, and it was just so resonating actually hearing what it's like to be an entrepreneur. There's just so many parallels. I mean, you mentioned Jeff Hinton. Thinking about the importance of having the passion, it keeping you up at night, building a team, knowing what your strengths are and what you need to complement that in your team. Just so many aspects. So I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. Now I know. I'd like to again thank our featured speakers tonight. Linda and Asha have done an exceptional job of highlighting these themes in their conversation. Knowing U of T's Faculty of Arts and Science played a role in that journey is inspiring. We're proud to be a place that nurtures curiosity, critical thinking, and creative ambition. As we close tonight's conversation, I ask all of you to save the date for our next Share Your Spark event. You don't have to wait a whole year. It's slated for March 3rd, 2026, as part of the university's Entrepreneur Week festivities. We will be announcing our speaker very soon. Sign up for the Center for Entrepreneurship e-newsletter to stay connected and hear about other avenues that support your entrepreneurial learning and your endeavors. I hope that, like me, you found the spark you needed tonight to jumpstart or perhaps continue your entrepreneurial thinking. Please join us in the lobby for the networking reception. I hope to see you all there. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your evening.